So happy to be back with Brian Scott, the host of the Reality Revolution podcast and the author of the recent book, The Reality Revolution. Welcome back, Brian.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I have some questions about the book, which I love so much. But one of the things before I even do that is there anything that you would put in the book now that, some time has passed and we're always learning, and is there anything that you would
I would
add?
definitely, I would add a chapter on Neville Goddard. I was not exploring Neville Goddard. I'd read Feeling is the Secret. And I would explore some of the more esoteric stuff like the Law of One. There's probably quite a bit I would add. If you notice when you read that book, I don't really talk about God or anything like that. And so I could maybe go towards that in that direction a little bit, but that book feels like it's several years old to me, and it's kind of in the past. So I'm with this, it's you're always updating what you're learning, and so there's probably stuff I could add to it for sure.
Yeah, cool. So one of the things that I love that this whole thing about the pineal gland and how it's a gateway to the dimensions. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating subject. The pineal gland throughout history has been identified as this gland that may be attached to consciousness on a different level and our own awakening. And I felt, at least, like there's a little bit of mystery with the pineal gland, that I had an awakening in my pineal gland. Something had changed. An awareness of my environment had changed, as if I had some sort of different sense. I had used techniques from Dr. Joe Dispenza and others to try to open it up, because it sounded like something I need to do. People had talked about opening up your third eye.
Yeah.
And so as I researched it, it really is an eye. It has nerve fibers that are identical to an eye. It's attracting light. And as a result of that, I felt like it was really important. And for a lot of people, when they focus on that area and change their habits, behaviors, diet, doing whatever they can, it does appear to be directly correlated to an awakening of some kind, and it's very powerful.
Yeah. For those who don't know, what is the exact location, would you say?
It's a little bit in the middle. If you can go directly in the middle, there's the pituitary gland and there's the pineal gland. So the pituitary is a little higher up in back, and it's basically in the middle. So it's not as important to know the exact location. If you know the general vicinity, your consciousness is more aware of it. It's attracting light. It's pulling light. So you can become aware of it without having a medical degree or anything like that. You can kind of become aware of it. That's the best way I can describe it.
Right. Yeah. And so that gland is the one that's referred to as the third eye then.
In most text, I believe that should be referred to as a third eye. It has an eye, it has a seeing function. It is attracting and looking at light. So yes, I think it's the third eye. I've heard other people say that it's not. There are some sciences that say it's not the third eye. I think it is, yes.
Right. It makes sense that it would be,
Right.
So, yeah, that's really cool. And as a gateway to the dimensions, is that so actually, what would you suggest would be a good way to activate it? I know Dr. Joe has these, this breath work that you do. Would that be the one, or?
There's a bunch of different ways that I've experimented with, that I've seen people use. It can be as simple as a psychological change. For me personally, it was a breathing change. What happens is a lot of the key energies in your body kind of stay lower in your body. And when you pull them up through breath, you can get those energies into your head. It seems to activate or do something to that gland. In my own personal experience. In yoga, they have used vibrational mantras to do it. I have a meditation on my channel that has been pretty successful that it relates to eye movements. It seems like the nervous system and that system is related. And so when you do a kind of set of eye movements, it brings both hemispheres of the brain together and seems to bring energy to that area. So that's another technique that I've used. Some people have you like will hang upside down or try to get the energy or blood moving towards their head. Those are different things that some people have awakened it just with the Om. Some people have awakened it with just becoming aware of intelligent energy. And like, as according to the law of one, it's an interface between intelligent infinity and intelligent energy. It's kind of like a conduit between those. So you can do it through just simple visualization. The interesting thing is everybody has a different story about it.
Yeah.
Seems to be very individualized, not as if it's all one thing exactly the same.
Right.
But yeah,
That's kind of like the plate, how people have different
it's
experiences.
very, very similar to the plate. And
Right.
if I was to do another chapter, that's another thing. What is the correlation between the third eye and the plate? I think that they are correlated. I do believe that there's a reason they're near each other, that this is kind of the receiver, and that's the motor that takes us to another dimension as well.
Oh,
So
yeah. I like that, the receiver and the motor. That's good.
right, could
Yeah,
be,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So, because is there like, if it's activated, is it something that we actually sense physically, or we just kind of like know that we've activated it
With
because
the third
we're,
eye,
yeah,
yeah, I've felt it before. I felt it. I don't know if it's in my head when I'm feeling it, but
yeah,
I've definitely felt it. I've definitely seems like I'd become aware of certain vibrations and sensations. I had
right.
one time when I was really focusing on, I could literally see an eye opening up and looking around. And I don't
Wow.
know how much of that was just my dream, just like me imagining it, but it felt like there was this other presence that was opening up and looking around as if it was just waking up. I've
Wow.
had that happen.
Yeah.
Most people will say that they feel a pressure that occurs there, so that there is a physical pressure of a sensation of energy that's coming. But it's interesting, I
Yeah.
don't think that there's been enough proper scientific research done on it,
Mm.
particularly because scientific research tends to look at stuff like this and diminish it. People don't give it the proper credibility, and so the proper research of the effects and power of the pineal gland, I think, has been
Yeah.
largely undermined. Some of the best stuff on the pineal gland can be found in books, in old secret societies, and things like that, where they were exploring these things in the past. And there
Yeah.
may be a group of thinking about the pineal gland that is simply unknown now.
Yeah.
I've always worried that there may be forces that have, some people argue like putting fluoride in the water blocks or calcifies the, maybe that's true. Maybe there's some sinister force that doesn't want our
Yeah.
third eye to open.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah.
I'm not citing any information.
Yeah.
I can see why that
Yeah.
it would be, if you suddenly become aware of different dimensions and it gives you power, maybe they wouldn't. I certainly hope that we haven't genetically been, over a period of time, just shut the third eye naturally because of the nature of human culture and its
Right.
progress. Uh, because it's like an unused organ, just similar to the plat. So I don't know, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think that there's a place for more scientific research. People
Yes.
can discuss their stories about it.
Yes, and it's probably active in children, right? And
Hmm.
and also the thing about anything like chemtrails or anything, we have the ability to negate it, though, right? Like because we're powerful, right? And so it's like even if we hear that fluoride can calcify the pineal gland, would you agree that we have the ability to negate that and say like my body's not going to respond to that? Because you think we have the power to be, it's same thing as the spontaneous healings and that kind of thing that,
Right.
do you think?
I do ultimately believe that our thoughts hold ultimate creative power, and that we can um, induce changes in our body that are not determined by the ingredients that we're putting in. I think that there's enough proof of that. I
Right.
don't know if chemtrails are related to it. And the research is, I don't know how well it is on fluoride. I know in terms of fluoride, I have tried toothpaste, for instance, that don't have
So have
fluoride, and
I.
my teeth hurt, and they don't. The toothpaste is terrible. So maybe it's not a conspiracy. Maybe fluoride just worked on the teeth, and it's just an unfortunate coincidence
Yeah,
that this happened.
yeah,
Uh, I don't know if they're, or
yeah,
maybe it's in my head that they're related. Maybe they're not. I don't know.
yeah,
It's really something that it's a personal experience that I've had. So I know it's important, but I
yeah.
don't know enough about it. And I'd love it if a legitimate researcher stood up and said, hey, there's something going on with this. We need to really look at this from a scientific perspective.
Hmm.
That just doesn't seem like that's happened. So,
Yeah. And also too, like, I wonder what's going on in the pineal gland, like at end of life when people are, transitioning. Like, there's
mhm.
probably a lot of activation going on, I would think, in the
Yeah,
pineal gland,
absolutely.
because that's the gateway, right?
Right. Now, some people will argue, I've been on some other podcasts, that it produces DMT. I don't know if it's a
Right.
producer or it's related. So,
Mhm.
what may be happening, some people argue at the end of life with the visions that people report having, is that they're having a DMT induced event. And
Right.
there's no way we could produce that unless somebody agreed, hey, I'm about to die in 5 minutes. I
Yeah.
agree that you can study my brain now.
Yeah.
There's really no way for us. So I think that it may be related to the creation of DMT,
Hmm.
uh, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I think that we go outside of that the body is not. We go outside of the body. The body is not determinative of what's happening at the end,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it may be related to what people report when they talk about near-death experiences.
Yes. Well, there was that doctor whose brain died, right? And then he had an
Right.
experience. So they were saying, well, if it's the brain, how did he have this experience when his brain was dead, right? But I think Ebenezer or whatever his name was.
Right. That
But
sounds familiar, and that
yeah,
story sounds familiar. And
yeah,
yes, people have been brain dead and reported these events.
yeah.
And it
So that negates, well, it's just the brain, right?
right.
Hmm.
It may be unrelated to the brain. It may be my own belief is that most of what we experience consciously or memory wise is not inside our brain. Our brain is sort of just like
You see that?
it's
Yeah.
connected to, like, if when you type
Mhm.
in a web address, you go to that link,
Mhm.
but it's not
Yeah.
inside the brain. So
Yeah.
it's just a conduit. But
Yeah.
that's my own belief.
Yeah, and also like I think more and more like Nassim Haramein, the physicist, he says that too. It's
Hmm.
a receiver, and he's a physicist. And
Yeah.
I first heard it from Deepak Chopra, who's more like a doctor. But so
Right.
it is kind of coming from different sources that we're just picking the information's out there because they go like you can't find anywhere in the brain where that memory is in grade 5 when so and so pulled your pigtail or something. It's like it's
Right.
not in there somewhere. It's being picked up from
Right.
out there, but.
And I was just reading a book by Drinvalo Melchizedek, and he's saying that the magnetosphere is what holds our memories, and that the
Oh,
the first signs that we saw proof of that are when cosmonauts went into space and started going insane. They would have to clip a magnet, some sort of thing that created a magnetical field around their body, so that they could retain their memories. Perhaps that's why we're not traveling deeply into space, or they have some modification. I don't know how much of that is true, but that
right,
does seem to indicate that there's something to that.
right. Yeah. And also like there's this thing about like where's that veil between physical and non-physical, right? Because
Hmm.
is that physical or non-physical? Things like memories and that kind of
Right.
thing.
And so it's the same question: is Wi-Fi physical? When we get
Right.
information on our phone, is that physical? Well, it ends up being a physical when we look at our phone, but in the air between us, we don't see it. So obviously, that's something that can really happen. Are we accessing some other wave that's like Wi-Fi, but we're not detecting it because we have? I mean, if we had Wi-Fi waves in the '90s, we
Yeah.
wouldn't know what that is because we haven't gone and used Wi-Fi waves. We would just detect the radio waves because we have a. So there may be other waves that we're just
Yeah.
not detecting. That's probably what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. That cool stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And then speaking of that, the energy meridians in the body, do you want to speak a little bit about that? Because there's, the chakras and there's acupuncture points and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And
I just did an episode on the channel where I explored that through the law of one. And it's
yeah,
really interesting. The study of energy centers and chakras is explored in all of these different disciplines that I discuss on my channel.
yeah,
Reality transurfing calls them energy meridians. Dr. Joe Dispenza calls them energy centers. In yoga, they call it the chakras. I've even heard to it as vortexes. So
yeah,
clearly there is something going on in our body where there's specified points where everything seems to come together, a focal point in our body that's related sometimes to things going on in our lives or our body or something outside. And it seems to be consistent in all of those disciplines. The way it works, we're still trying to understand, but you don't need to be woo-woo or a spiritualist to believe in this stuff. An endocrinologist can point to these points in your body as real, legitimate areas that affect your body. Nerve bundles, we know that there's a nerve bundle where we go to the bathroom. We know that there is in our stomach where we get nervous, we get butterflies. We know that we see in the solar plexus. We can also feel in our heart, we can in our throat. They all seem to be related to different aspects of the personality.
yeah,
And all of these disciplines, all of these different sciences also seem to correlate colors that are the same. They all, they all show a red color. Where is that coming from? I don't know.
yeah,
People are saying that by looking at the color, or the color is related after the fact, but red in the root or orange in the stomach or yellow in the solar plexus, green in the heart, purple in the throat, and, just the same colors that you would see in the rainbow.
right.
Red, orange, yellow, green, Roy G. Biv, as they taught us in school, right?
Yeah,
Red, orange, green, indigo, violet, right? And so
yeah,
we're just walking prisms from
yes,
what this is saying. And so this light, which to my own belief is everything around us, uh, is just made up of light. And we're just a walking prism of light that is differentiating this in a way that it makes this light seem intelligent. And it's definitely worth further study. There's obviously something there, and maybe it's related to something more. And I'm continuing to learn about it. The thing that I found interesting in that episode is that I had never really thought about properly, is that we always think about, I want to open up my third eye, but it's not it's like the earth. There's a north and a south pole. And so in many ways, the energy coming up from our body may be related to the earth. The energy coming down, maybe the sun or the universe. And it seems like it's a melding of these energies, a
mhm,
north and a south pole, that the energy coming up is just as important as the energy coming down. And
yeah,
they form an alchemy in our body. This energy from the sun and the energy from the earth, they seem to be different energies.
yes,
So there seems to be the multiple channels of energies. And in transurfing, the argument is, it's just that it's like a hose that they get locked, and and they just need to be opened and expanded. That it can be done by naturally imagining it.
yeah,
Uh, but others will believe that it's even more, that it's a ray, that it's a body, that it's, who knows, but
yeah.
uh, it's
Like
definitely,
it's like it's an ecstatic feeling too. Like I love, like I do it every day in the summer. I walk barefoot in the grass, right? And there's something
yeah,
so ecstatic about that, right? Like it's like the most
I,
ecstatic feeling to walk on the ground like that, and then
yeah,
after the rain, when you smell the earth and the trees and the leaves, it's like, oh my
yes.
God, like there's nothing like it.
Absolutely, there is something, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I think that 3 or 4 years ago, somebody posted a video, oh, how you can ground,
Yeah,
and so I ran outside and put my feet in the grass, and
yeah,
I noticed it. And then you start reading the law of one and some of the yoga material, and we are connecting to the earth. The
yeah,
earth is the energy. We are also releasing energy.
yeah, yeah,
So it's we are not a receptacle. We're a hose, a pipe that is
yeah,
running.
yeah,
And so there is something about that energy. When we block the root energy, it's like we have some energy coming in, but it weakens, and it's like we're not connected to the earth anymore. We're not
yeah,
connected to our own lives anymore.
Yeah.
Each level of the chakras seem to be related to my well-being and survival, and they're all a part of just the human experience on some level, and the
Yeah.
aspect of God, which is why it's important to study. But I agree with you. I have the same thing. I
Yeah.
sit out in the grass now, and
It's
something
wonderful.
magical seems to happen.
Yeah.
They've looked at studies and they've seen that it does something. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the experience is the proof, right? Like, I mean, I'm experiencing it. I don't need anybody to, tell me it's not true. But
exactly.
also, oh God, what was I going to say? The love, like you can feel like almost like that the earth loves us somehow. And love is just a word, because I can't think of another word, but like
Hmm.
when somebody's feeling really depressed or they have a problem or something, like
Hmm.
always helps to go out in nature. And even if it's just to like there's nature in the city, like we have lots of trees and flowers and everything in the city, so even if someone can't get out, even
I
just
think
to
you
go to a
froze up
park
on
or
me.
something, there's just something about it that it's this provides this instant healing when
All right.
you're
It's
feeling
frozen.
depressed or something, you just go out there, right?
Yeah. All right.
So
It's froze up on me. I think I got you, but
oh, did it freeze up?
it froze up a little bit there, but
Oh.
okay.
Oh, okay.
So don't worry about it. We can fix it. But
Okay.
you were saying before, you were talking about uh, rooting with the earth and how it affects you personally. And then you said,
Right, just like when somebody's depressed or something, or
yes,
feeling it, in a way that's, is heavy on the heart. Just going out in
nature.
nature really helps
Yeah.
that. And even if it's just in a park in the middle of the city or something, there's this one tree or something, and you just sit
Yeah.
back and it's incredible. Like, cause like we're exchanging energy. Right, and it gives. So I was going to say, like, it's this loving energy because it's like it's giving. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
just trees are just giving their loving energy, for lack of another term. There's something that
When
is
people are talking about this big awakening now, I think one of the key components is the connection to the earth. I'm growing my garden. I've never done that before.
oh,
My plants are all very important to me. They never were before. I feel a connection more than I did before. And it
yeah,
seems like that connection is a part of the unity consciousness. Uh, I keep on mentioning his name because he's such an amazing author, but Drinvalo Melchizedek also argues what we've been going through as we become focused just on ourselves
right.
is that we've gone away. If you look at the golden mean in the Fibonacci sequence with nature,
Yeah,
all the plants, all that have that, but we're just totally geometrically not related. And eventually, if you look at as Earth, as this incarnation of humans, we've been on Earth for many, many other times. We just start killing all the other animals and the Earth. There's millions of species that are now extinct because we are just devastating in this density. When it's all about ourselves, we will kill anything around us. And so that is the big problem that we've had stuck in this density. And so what I believe is happening, this transition into a 5D or fourth density, whatever you want to call it, whatever the magic word is a connection to the earth. The earth is guiding us. And the more we connect to the earth, the more these energies flow through us, the more it seems like that there is a unity consciousness, but the avenue to find it is in nature. As I find more and more, as I add more plants to my room. And so who knows if that's true, but it feels like it's true. And I resonate with what you say
yeah.
completely.
We got to trust what we feel. And besides that, I mean, that is our set and decorations. We're on Earth. We're on
Right.
Earth with nature, and so like it's part of it's extension of our body actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Really.
I've never really thought of it in the same way, but I'm seeing plants and trees as living things
Yes.
that have consciousness.
Yeah.
I have a plant at my house that is so dramatic. Like when I put it out in the sun a certain way, it like flops down, and I'll put it right. I'll put it in the shade, and I'm like, oh come on, you were just doing that, being circ. And I'm having
Yeah.
conversations with plants and trees, and I'm hearing them talk back to me.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
I don't think I'm crazy. I think that there's a connection that's growing and it's happening, and then that's part of what's happening right now. And the more I connect, if you look at a great book, Dawson Church,
Yeah.
um, who wrote, who I interviewed, who talks about how thoughts create reality. In his book, in the final chapters, he's making the argument that that connection to nature is where we is the key. He talks about going to the redwood forest, and it is magical. There's something more. Perhaps all of Earth is one living entity, and every single plant is just a part of that. And when we connect to these plants, we're connecting to that one
Yeah.
living entity of the Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even rocks and grass and everything, like
Yeah.
all of it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And then all the animals and all the critters, because
Right.
like, I think we've all experienced it, where you really feel the birds are in tune with you. Like when you think something really beautiful, and at the same time, a bird swoops down really close to you, or
Hmm.
starts, responding, and it's like,
Yeah.
I always have in my journal, like, and the birds agreed, because I could be like, why they always agree, and it's kind of like, because it's vibrational. So I think they're picking up the vibe that,
Absolutely.
you're having a beautiful vibe, and they pick it up and they come really close or whatever. So yeah, that's really great. Everything is so wonderful, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. No, the birds in particular, something special about that. William Blake talks about the incredible um, pleasure, the heavenly pleasure of the bird. And Neville Goddard, his lecture, The Four Mighty Ones, talks about how birds are communicating with us. And I've had a number of events with animals and birds. And uh, I'm not telling anybody that what I'm experiencing is true. I'm saying start looking around.
Yeah.
You're going to start noticing that these animals and birds and nature are not random around you, that they have intent and purpose, and that they are communicating with you. So I suggest anybody listening to this interview to try that. Just start noticing that these animals are together, working in conjunction as a part of something greater. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Wow, it's amazing. I love how you say, in your book, that everything is a miracle, because it really, really is.
It
And
is.
it's great to acknowledge that. It feels really good to acknowledge that all the time, what a
Yeah.
miracle this is.
To remind myself on a regular basis when I fall out of that thinking, then
Yeah,
it doesn't work for me. I want to always be in that feeling of
yeah,
like a child seeing that everything is miraculous, because that mindset, that state of mind, it brings more miracles. I start seeing
yes,
them. When you start looking for them, they start happening more often.
it does.
Yeah.
And so, like, just being in the state of awe and reverence, and gratitude and all that,
Hmm.
it just puts you in this other state of being, where everything around you gets more and more like that. So it's
Absolutely. Yes.
fun. It's amazing. I just feel great to now, speaking of all that stuff with birds and rocks and all that, there's this one of the things you have in your book is the viewpointing, and that's really interesting, because you even include what's the viewpoint of that chair in the corner, right? Like, not so,
Yeah.
it's not even only, it's like inanimate objects viewpoint as well. Talk a little bit about what viewpointing is. It's really cool.
Yeah. I got this from Frederick Dotson.
Yeah.
And so it really, really, really helped me understanding my oneness and connection to everything. Uh, and it's something I recommend for people that are trying to create their reality. Go around your room that you're in now, and each object, take the viewpoint of the object as if it's a conscious living thing. And you find out you can. It's not difficult.
Yeah.
Your imagination it's not hard for you to imagine that you're that one living thing, that you're the table. And so if you start doing this to all the objects and really take your time going around your house and viewpointing it, it seems like you have a more direct connection to all of those things. And it's easier for you to create within your own mind once you have the viewpoint. You want that new house, but you haven't thought about what the viewpoint of all the objects. So what seems to happen is you become directly connected to your reality and the environment around you. It helps you to understand the flow of energy. It's really has definitely changed me, and I definitely, that's a very important technique, especially when you're trying to create your reality, which is what I'm talking about in the book.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting to do it for something, that you're imagining, in addition to something that's already here, right?
Right.
So that's interesting. I never quite thought
When
about
we
it.
imagine, we're always imagining either looking at ourselves or from our own point of view.
Right,
Those, it seems like only two viewpoints. So
right,
your little reality is not taking into consideration all of those other viewpoints.
right.
So when you slow down, and it does require some patience,
Yeah.
because hey, this is kind of boring for some people when they do it, right? But if you slow down and then consider all these other viewpoints, it makes your particular imagination three-dimensional on a different level. You get the perspectives of it. Even if you're a movie director, you
Yeah.
start to understand the richness of your reality becomes more solidified.
Mm. Yeah, and it probably also helps with self-awareness because like, well,
Hmm.
how is that person perceiving me? Because I heard somebody say that, you see other people more than like other people see you more than you see yourself, right? Because they're always looking at you, right? So like other people are always
Right.
looking at you. So they know what you look like. You see yourself in the mirror or on a video or something and you think that's what you look like, but really other
Yeah.
people know what you really look like.
I'm
But
still that kid that has a full head of hair, man. When I look at myself, I'm like, geez, man. I am. I sometimes I'll sit here and I'll think that I still move my hair over, and I've been like this for 20 years.
yeah.
So, we all look differently to ourselves within ourselves,
Yeah.
uh, for sure.
There's that joke where the two ladies are sitting in the bar having a drink, and then one lady says to the other, "Hey, look at those two ladies there. That's us in 20 years." And the friend looks and says, "That's a mirror." Like it was a mirror, but she thought
Oh,
she.
right. Yeah.
You walk by, and you go, "Who is that?" You walk by, like you see your reflection somewhere, like that's
Right.
not me, right? But but also in the fact of your behavior, right? So like how is another person experiencing me, right? As
Right.
far as like for
If you
self-reflection in that way.
if you notice the key technique that Neville Goddard uses when he discusses who, if anybody doesn't know Neville Goddard, was an incredible uh, scholar on reality creation. He does become a little biblical at times, but he's always imagining other people having conversations about him from their viewpoint. That he sees that they see you as the successful person. They say, "Oh, she just got $100,000. Oh, I heard she's healthy now. Oh, I heard she's in love now." He always used moving into other people's perspectives to create for his own reality. And so there obviously is power in that point of
Yeah.
imagination.
I really like that. I missed that one. I hadn't heard that. And that is such a good one because it's
Mhm.
especially good for people who have difficulty, imagining, or for themselves, because the one that I did hear him say that I liked is when he says, imagine yourself telling a friend, right? So it's like telling a friend, "Oh, I just got this amazing raise,"
Right,
right? So it's like if you can't imagine it happening, imagine you telling someone. But I like
right,
this one about having people talking about you.
right. He says you're not even there, just like you're just eavesdropping on their conversation
Right.
about you, and imagine that they're saying wonderful things about you. Oh, did you hear about Dee? I heard she has a fantastic new book. She just won the lottery. Something like that. And then
Right.
your feelings about them saying it to you, or they could be talking to you directly, but
Right.
there
Yeah.
is this perspective. Now, it's interesting if you go deep on Neville Goddard. He has later on kind of an advanced technique where you go into the body of somebody else and from their eyes imagine what you want. But he has this long warning because he had somebody that went and tried that was angry and hateful towards the person and wanted something bad to happen
Oh,
to them, and they
wow.
got stuck.
Mm,
They got stuck, like they couldn't move. They had imagined themselves going into the body and they couldn't move. They got stuck. Eventually they were released, but it was like a warning. Like if you're going to imagine for other people from their perspective, and that person wouldn't want you to imagine that for them,
right.
do it at your own. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Because I mean,
dangerous, you know.
yeah, like that kind of thing is only going to have bad results. Like if somebody has negative intentions or something, they're going to get negative results. I mean, that's just not, you know,
Right. If
we have to,
everybody is one, then if you're imagining badly for another, then you're
yeah,
imagining badly for
yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you mean? What was that process? So he goes into a different person's body. Like you mean if you want somebody, like let's say you have a child and they're struggling with something and you want to imagine them coming out of it, like in that kind of, is that what you mean?
Right.
Or
Well, he's like say there's a girl that owes this guy money and she's been terrible, so he goes and imagines that she suffers or something, like
oh,
from her perspective.
yeah. But
And
what would be the
it
good way?
doesn't work. It doesn't work because he's stuck and this
Yeah.
person couldn't release. So the only thing that you can try to do when you imagine from these viewpoints is to imagine lovingly,
Right.
because they're all you. You can't, if you imagine the other person has enough power to block you, but if it's something that they would want, they're go right ahead. Thank you for
Right.
helping. Right.
So like you would imagine that that person is experiencing something. Is that what you mean?
Right.
Like going to their
Like
body,
if you have a friend that's unemployed and doesn't have a car,
right?
then you can imagine that person in the car, as he explains, and they're in a convertible, a nice new car, and the hair is running through the wind is running through their hair as their hand on the steering wheel,
Right.
and they're happy. They
You're
feel
right.
happy because they're employed.
Yeah.
So that is one technique that and that worked.
Yeah.
And I've actually tried that almost immediately afterwards with somebody that I thought was unhelpable, and they got a job, and it looks like soon they'll be able to buy a car. So it does work. There's different
Yeah.
ways to imagine for others, but
Yeah.
definitely viewpointing is a beginning for that.
Right. Yeah. And then like there's that whole thing about, well, in a sense, they are you, right? In one way.
Right. They are, no, it's not a sense. They
Okay.
are you to me.
Yeah.
Just assume that you're me, I am you.
Yeah.
And so I would only imagine what I would want myself.
Right.
That's later on in one of Neville Goddard's books on the secret to prayer.
Yeah.
He says, if you would not want it for yourself, that's the test. You can
Right.
imagine for anybody else,
Yeah.
and it's okay if you would want it for yourself. If it's something that you would want for yourself, if it's not, then it will not work.
Yeah.
So
And that's something that the person would want too, right?
something that the person
Right.
would
Because
want.
you might want to go and live in New York, but that person wants to go live in the country, right? So you got to be careful with that.
Right.
But you know that, yeah. But
Right.
it'd be more like a feeling, right? You want the person to feel free,
Right.
because if they're feeling stuck or whatever. Yeah, that's really
Right.
cool.
But
Yeah,
it's so funny. I still get comments when I post. I have somebody that's an enemy and I want something terrible to happen to them. And it's like,
oh
don't do
no.
that, because something terrible will happen to you when you start
Yeah,
in this, that's
yeah,
why you want to be careful, because it
yeah,
is powerful.
yeah.
And
And
maybe some of the stuff that you've had or we've had happen in our past could just be an offhand moment where maybe you see something on TV. Here's a good example: politics. Everybody has some politician that they start to hate and see evil in, and
yeah,
they wish badly of that person. Guess what? That
yeah,
is still the same rule is in effect. You
mm,
want something terrible to happen to that person, and then something terrible starts to
yeah,
happen to you. And it's
yes,
happening on a widespread scale.
I,
There's so much hatred and anger.
I know.
And so why do we see such conflict in the world? Part of it is because we're wishing it on others. And
Yeah,
we have to flip the switch and stop that instinct in us, because sometimes it's
yeah,
instinctual.
yeah, yeah. And also, they it's a misguided feeling that of righteousness, because it's like people think like, if I hate this over here, then I'm just demonstrating how good I am, because that's bad and I like the good. Like it's misguided. Like they're thinking that hating something is going to prove how good they are, and that's not true. Like I find like people that think they're very enlightened, but then they mock people who don't agree with them, right? And it's kind of like, well, you're not that enlightened if you're mocking other people, because it's
Mhm.
like underneath any surface story is how we treat each other, and this I had this like really interesting experience at a seminar at work, right? Like they
Mhm.
divided everybody into groups, and then they had I think there were 5 people in each group, and then they said like there's a scenario where the ship is going down, and then like they can only put like 7 people in a lifeboat, and then they listed all these occupations, from doctor, nurse, artist, engineer. They listed a whole bunch of, and they said, now your group has to pick, the people that are going to go on the lifeboat, and because they're going to go to an island and start a new community. And then so then while everybody was discussing this, the facilitator was walking around the room, listening. And then when the time was up, he said, I don't care who you picked. I was looking at how you're dealing with each other, and he goes, was there somebody who was dominating the conversation? Was there somebody who couldn't get a word? So the whole thing is we didn't even realize that the exercise was, how are we treating each other? And how are we resolving this, right? Because that always seems to be the thing underneath anything. It's like, like, and people are like, oh, our group is going to win because we picked the right whatever, or some people weren't even agreeing, like, this person's more important than that, like getting all, like this about it. And it's kind of like underneath anything. Well, that's just how I kind of see it, is like, how enlightened are we if we're going to be mocking people who don't agree with us, right?
Well,
And
it's frustrating because there are obvious truths in the world. There are
yeah,
things that are obviously wrong.
yes,
There are
but
things that are
mocking,
obviously wrong. And
yes,
so it is
definitely.
hard when something is obviously wrong and we want it to be right, for us not to mock it. It's a natural instinct. I don't necessarily look down at people, but it's sad because ultimately it will not have the effect. It will make
Yeah.
things worse. But there is truth that can't be denied. There are things that are wrong that people
Yeah,
should speak up about. And so what we're
yeah,
learning is how to address those things
yeah,
in a better manner so that we can resolve them. Ultimately, we want to fix these problems. It's nice if everybody feels good, but there's ultimately it's an instinctual way that we relate and address these problems, and we're learning. And hopefully the biggest thing that is sad about the world to me, and I'm not mocking, is just
yeah,
the ignorance.
yeah,
So if we can learn that, first of all, our thoughts do create reality, and that we have some we are responsible on some level, and it's coming from our reaction to others. And if we think unlovingly, we will continue to have unlovingly things. It's a tough lesson. Some people take their entire lifetime and never learn it, and I'm still learning the lessons of love.
yeah,
And
yes.
nobody's perfect.
We're all
People are
students.
going to mock and they don't mean it. And when I do see that,
Yes.
they're just coming from a place of not
And
understanding the
I've done
effect
it.
of
I'm
it.
guilty of it too,
Of
right?
course, I've done it too.
We've all
um,
done it, right?
we've all
Yeah,
done it, and
yeah,
it's coming from a not understanding in that moment of
yeah,
the effect of it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and
So,
hopefully we can learn the effect of our reactions. That's a big thing, is that our reactions tend to be more important than the stuff we sit down and think about for 30 minutes in a meditation that we really address. But then we'll have an offhand reaction with a big emotion. And so to me, I see a lot of stuff is reaction that we need to work on. And
right.
that's just programming.
Yeah. And then that goes back to the self-reflection and self-awareness
Mhm.
and all that, right? And then,
And fear too.
right,
Yeah. But yeah.
right. We can we change our past? Like, I know that the past, like, okay, we know we are not our past, right? So that, I mean, that comes with identity. And there's this William James quote, that if you want equality, and you had this in your book, act as if you already had it, right? So this whole
Right.
thing about our identity and what we are and all that. So, if we've done things in the past, that we, feel guilty about or feel really bad about, we can recognize, right, that
Right.
we, yeah,
I do believe we can change our past,
yeah,
and there may be a timeline that occurs where that past is completely changed, but also within our timeline, there is a correction. For instance, uh, a woman, I think there was a story Neville Goddard gives where a woman gets into a car accident and hurts her eyes. And then she has she can't see very well. She goes back and imagines missing the car accident, and so she's driving around the cars, and then slowly over a period of time she goes back to the eye doctor and her eyes are better, and the eye doctor is, I can't believe that changed. So there seems to be a correction that occurs. Maybe she moves into the reality where she didn't have the car accident, but there seems to be a bridge of incidents to make it seem rational within our own mind on some
yeah.
level. I had a time travel meditation on my channel for a long time, and I had to remove it because
Why?
it caused, for some people, it clearly was causing it was doing more harm than good. People were not letting go of the past. I was getting people that were emailing me every day. Did I change my past? How do I do this? What do I need to do to change my? Because some people have such horrible events that it becomes escapist for them, and they say, well, I'm just going to try to go change the past. I had somebody that was about to go into jail that had been accused of something that was, Brian, I'm doing this 6 or 7 times a day, and I'm just going back trying to change what happened so I don't go to jail. So I'll wake up and so I think that there is clearly a tension between this, and so uh, you can end up focusing on your past too much to where you get stuck in it, and it keeps on reoccurring. It's a very delicate operation. Revision seems to be maybe perhaps a little bit cleaner and better, revising stuff in the past. The more recent, the better. It tends to be that the effects of that past incident, even if it still happened in the memories of everybody, change, and you're on a timeline where it's as if it didn't happen. Is the
Right.
best way I can explain it.
Yeah. And even like in the revision, it's something happens in your body, right? And I think that's what happened with that woman. So the woman with the eyes, so
Right.
she imagined in her body that it didn't happen, so her body responded to that. So it's
Something
almost
happened.
irrelevant whether she actually physically changed or not, because
Right.
what mattered is that it changed in her. And that happens with people who have trauma, when they can like rethink it, like like see it from a different eyes, or change it, or whatever, that the body is then receiving it. Because like you said, every single time you think of something, your body is re-experiencing it. So every time someone remembers their trauma, their whole body's going through it again, right?
Right. There's definitely, the memory is recreating. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's certainly a part of it. In my last in my last global meditation, I had a portion where I tried to have everybody revise the Earth's past. I don't think that we would necessarily change the past, but the energy of that past
Mm-hmm.
is like a tide, like a wave that's pushing us
Yes.
towards an ongoing event. Maybe we need to revise the past to get rid of that energy. Accept that it's true, not saying that we're ignoring it or acting like it didn't happen, but energetically revising the past seems to be a possible. It has happened in my life. I've had events that I was ashamed of, and things that happened in past relationships that, by revising it, those everything that was related to those events changed. So it
Mm-hmm.
clearly was probably related to something that was happening within me, but the effect of it is very powerful, and it does appear to act like you are changing the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then your whole world is responding to your energy, which is now a different energy, because now
Right.
the past happened differently.
You're going to act as if that thing happened. And usually it's not the thing that happened, it's your reactions and the way you acted afterwards that carried you into the future. A
Right.
lot of times an event happens and it's not the stuff afterwards, it's your reaction to the event, not the event itself, and your
Yeah.
actions around that event.
Yeah. Like the story of the monk who carries the woman across the puddle, and 2 hours later, the other monk is still giving him shit for it. And he's going, I put her down 2 hours ago, or someone
Right.
who, they have an altercation with someone or whatever. And then 2 hours later, their spouse says, oh, how was your day? And then that's what they pick to talk about, like you could talk about anything that you saw
Right.
or did, but it's okay. You're still carrying it with you. So then the energy is still in the body. And so,
So understanding that, it tells you that by ignoring things, they keep on coming up because they're defining our past. So
mm,
revising it, so that does tell us that we are created by our past, our reality is created by it. We either have to revise it or change it. We can't ignore it. We can't act like everything's okay.
right.
So if there's problems we have in our world, don't act like everything's okay. If other people are saying that it's not okay, then we need to go about trying to change the energy of it. We
Mm-hmm.
can do that by revising, by changing. There's a multiple different ways to do it, but
Yeah.
but that tells us it's a mistake to ignore it, because it's
Yes.
still there, creating our reality now.
Right. It's that thing about, something festering inside. If you keep pushing it down, it's going to fester. But if you
Yeah.
let it come out and move through, then it goes.
Yes.
Right?
I think that we're not very good at that
Yeah.
as human beings. We're not very good at it.
Yeah.
So,
So speaking of the global meditations, it seems like it's becoming a cultural thing, because more and more people are doing global meditations, and there's so many of them, and
mhm.
it seems to be something that's happening, and you're doing them, and it's just wonderful that it's that I think they called it the Maharishi effect, right? That when enough people are meditating on peace or whatever, that it does affect
Right. I think that that's happening on one level. It's always been proven scientifically that
Yeah.
group meditations have an effect reducing violence. I talk about it in the book, reducing violence
Yeah.
and murders. And so that's always been. I think that something new is happening now, that I think that this reality revolution is related to a possible changes in our earth and an advancement in evolution in humanity. And we're starting to connect on a different level in what the law of one talks about, a social memory complex, a unity consciousness where it's more than just us meditating. We're literally connecting and becoming one in that meditation. I've
Mhm.
had several where people have contacted me afterwards. We're connecting to a unity grid. I feel like I'm connected to way more. When I read history, I know the history now. When I'm reading authors, the author's with me, not necessarily channeling, but I'm getting information and knowledge now from these group meditations. We're accessing some group consciousness that I think slowly is going to change the world in a big way. We're going to start understanding ourselves differently because we're going to start seeing ourselves, and it's going to change everything. It's going to be hard for some people to take. I think it's an indication of a tipping point happening,
Yeah.
and eventually we're going to have worldwide meditations that are going to be happening,
Yes.
or like
Yes.
half the world will meditate. Can you imagine
Yeah.
if half the world just chose to meditate for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
What would happen in the world? It would be an
Yeah.
amazing thing.
Yeah.
I think that's happening. Even for the people that aren't meditating, they're starting to feel an access to some additional information. And a lot of the changes we're seeing in the world is this group consciousness beginning to form. Right now we only see it in our subconscious. Our subconscious is realizing these truths. But over time, you're gonna go to a date and you're gonna meet a guy and you're gonna know everything that he did, like all the good stuff and the bad stuff. And some dude is going to go on a date with you, and just naturally he's just going to know everything. It might be deep down we're going to start knowing things that we should not have known in the past, and it's going to change everything, the way we interact with people, everything. And so
Yeah.
we'll start forgiving people, probably because we'll start realizing that everybody is messed
Yes.
up more
Yeah.
than we realize. We all have our secrets.
Yes. Because probably the very best, or one of the best things that Jesus ever said was cast the first stone, because it's like, I think of that when I want to get mad at somebody for something they did or didn't do. And I think, am I a perfect person? Right. Because you got like whoever, has not sinned, you throw the first stone. It's like, because it's like, and then they one by one drop their stones. Because it's like, how could we not forgive people for, especially if they're not even that big of a thing. It's not like they murdered your child or something, but
Right.
I mean, even then but that whole thing, like nobody is completely without making any kind of mistake.
No.
Right?
But the teaching on forgiveness is interesting because it's all good in theory, but people knowing the concept of forgiveness and then facing situations where it's important, it's not the same. Real true. I mean, yeah, I've read those. I believe, I consider myself a Christian. I believe in the teachings of Jesus, but then I've had things I couldn't forgive myself over. I've had things that people have done to me that I could not forgive, and I'd say, "Oh, I forgive them," but I really didn't. And so there's a lesson in forgiveness that I think is the next step. We understand the concept. I don't think we've reached the point of applying the lesson of forgiveness. And it's going to take a long time, because it is some of this stuff that is unforgivable. So we have to learn how to forgive the unforgivable. It's going to be hard. It's not our
Yeah.
culture is to blame and get angry with. And so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Hopefully teachers can teach us that, and we can learn that intuitively. It may take time. Yeah.
Forgiving ourselves really is hard. Is
It very,
like
yeah.
there's this inner thing that just wants to beat you up forever about some things that you've done or said, right? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes that's more important than forgiving others. For me, yeah, I just, like, I'm stuff I was ashamed of, that I couldn't take back, that I felt terrible with. I remember my sister and I were trying to sell a house, and she had meditated, and she said, "Brian, there's something I can feel it that you haven't forgiven yourself with." And I went, and I'm meditating every day, and I went, and she was right. And I couldn't believe it, and I had been blocking everything. So when I really dedicated some time on it, it took me couple weeks, and I felt like I had forgiven it. So that the test for me was if it came up in my mind, I didn't have that biting feeling, that initial thought. And then when I did, it was like as soon as it was done, somebody contacted us and wanted to buy the house. So I felt like it was related. So
Yeah.
a lot of times the things we're trying to create are being blocked by things, the energies that are coming into us that want to express itself, but we're saying, no, we don't deserve it. I'm going to
Yes.
push it down. I'm not going to allow this wonderful energy into my life because I am unforgivable for what I did. This is
Right.
happening 9 out of 10 times. I can guarantee people have had something, and it may be for you and I something that's no big deal.
Right.
But it could be
Exactly.
something that
Other
they're,
people forgot all about it. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But for them, it's so hard. So
Yeah.
that's why the whole Ho'oponopono is powerful, because it brings up stuff that we don't think about on a regular basis, and it's general enough so that you can kind of start just getting that overall forgiveness. But it's an ongoing process, and I have
Yeah.
things I need to forgive. I still have things that bite when they come to me. I'm still working on it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's this inner critic that can be so nasty to us, right? And
mhm,
it's our coming from our own self or whatever. And then
yeah,
it's kind of then that same part that there's a part that doesn't want to forgive because it confuses forgiving with saying it's okay what they did. So the other person could have done something really, really horrible. And then we think if we forgive them, we're saying it's okay what they did, but it's not. Forgiving
right,
someone isn't saying it's okay what you did. It's saying I'm not going to carry this burden, you
right,
know.
yeah. The book written by the guy that started Mind Valley. It's really good. His first book that he wrote. He talks about going to this. I think it's 40 years of Zen. They can monitor their brain waves while you meditate, and you can see the things that are affecting him. And he said when they look at these brain waves of meditators that have been meditating for 40 years every day, the key is the forgiveness. He had some employees in his life that had done some terrible stuff, but he had not forgiven them. And so as soon as he could forgive them, he could see on the screen. He could see on the screen the way that his own biorhythms and EEG had affected and balanced out.
Yeah.
It's a real physical scientific thing. We're not, everybody makes the mistake of treating this information like it's woo-woo and
Yeah.
unprovable, but there's
Yeah.
science to it. And
Yeah.
forgiveness is one of the key components to expanding our consciousness.
Yes.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yes. And I think it's in A Course in Miracles, where like it's like, or even others, like it's like if you're doing everything right, to manifest something, so you're imagining it right and you're doing everything right,
Mhm.
but it's not happening. It's because there's some unforgiveness in you. It's blocking,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And so that may come back to the chakras or energy centers.
Yeah.
What's happening is the forgiveness is blocking one of those energy centers. And we need
Yeah.
we become the full prism of the energy that's coming through us to express what we want to see outside of us.
Yeah.
But the forgiveness, it could be blocking on one of
Yeah.
these levels. It could be
Yeah.
we've shut our heart off, or
Yeah.
we could, on a number of levels. So that's, I think, where it's related.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. And you can definitely feel it in your body, because there was this one particular person that it took me a long time to forgive, something that I knew when I did, because it felt so good. Like, and I mean, I
Hmm.
had been consciously working on it for years, because I know it's right to forgive. I know it's right to forgive,
Right.
but then when it really, really did happen, the feeling in my body was of such release and such relief and such like, unconditional love and all that. Because I know it's a term that's overused a lot, but there are no other words for that, and I just felt it in my whole body, and it just felt so, like, okay, this time I really did do it. Before I was just saying it.
Right.
But
Yeah. I
yeah.
had I had a client that was a really tough one that had raised 3 kids with no child support. The husband had abandoned her completely and never paid a dime of child support.
Oh my God.
And she had to figure out a way to forgive him. Very difficult to forgive somebody that basically, in her eyes, had destroyed her life and made it, she was utterly poor and could not work and so many things because of all that stuff. But once she really did, then everything almost seemed to speed up, and everything that she wanted started happening for her. And there's hundreds of examples Neville Goddard gives, and all of these great
Yeah.
teachers. And a lot of times it does come to forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. They even say that sometimes about people who have trouble sleeping, like, what haven't you forgiven? And it even could be
Right.
yourself, right? And that sometimes is that, I mean, sometimes it's not that because people just have an active mind or something, but it's one
Yeah.
of,
And on
I
a larger scale, if you believe in reincarnation, a lot of us might just be stuck here, because we have not forgiven. And so we're in a karmic spider web
right,
where we're just living through all these regrets, and and forgiveness issues that go on for millions of years in some cases. We never learned the lesson. So we
right,
can change everything if we can go through, uh, and and forgive everything. It's not for them. You're not letting them off the hook. You're not saying that what they did is okay.
right.
It's for you.
Yeah.
You don't ever have to talk to them again, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's what we're carrying, and carrying it in the body. The
Right.
body's holding it. So,
And so when we reach that unity consciousness where we all one,
yeah.
we won't be able to reach it without forgiving. And it's going to be hard. And I think that's a key issue. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. Because it's like, well, if it's all one, then it's everyone.
Right. That means that that person who did it is me. And that's
Yeah.
really hard for me to come to terms with. But I've
Yeah.
started saying that if somebody did something terrible, then one of the first things I say, okay, why did I do this to myself?
Oh,
Just so I can contemplate and go into their perspective and imagine that it's me. And it always helps me to understand and get a perspective and forgiveness of it. So
oh, that's a good one. And actually, we can probably say that about anything that happens to us that we don't like. Like, why did I do this to myself? Because,
yeah.
some people just blame everybody else, blame the government, blame this, blame that, for the
Hmm.
situation. But it's kind of like, it's good for us to ask ourselves, why did I do this to myself? Right?
Right.
Because we're creators of our reality. So, well, we've come to an hour. And is there anything that you want to add or anything
No,
special
just
you'd like
thank you
to
for having me on. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really fun talking with you.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Brian. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Sounds good.
Okay, take care. I look forward to Mildred Mann in an hour.
All right.
Okay, bye.